All right, with that, we have Mr. Gonzalez, all aboard, FECI. Thank you, Dr. Lee.
Good morning. Thank you, Vice Chair Mowry, Michael, and Kim. I'm Mr Gonzalez on behalf of Florida Coast Industries. On board Florida, we appreciate the opportunity to address the issues raised by council. For the sake of clarity, I'm going to read our formal response. That way I can address all the different issues. Specifically, I don't have a PowerPoint, so we'll just go into that. So passenger rail on the FEC has been a priority of the region. Well, and the local government at this table for about 20 years. Together, you guys have advocated for Amtrak, Tri-Road Coastal Link, and consistently supported alternative modes of transportation, all working to connect South Florida and destinations and providing connections throughout the Treasure Coast and to our most visited regions to the north, which is Central Florida. Why do you advocate for these projects? Because you know, like I do, that these diverse transportation mobility options would keep a competitive edge and maintain the high quality of life of millions of residents who call Sunshine State home. It's no secret that Florida continues to grow. This year it's going to surpass New York and become the third largest state in the country with 19.6 million people. We have to ask ourselves, how do those people go move throughout the regions? How are they going to move throughout the state? Will businesses continue to relocate to Florida if they aren't reliable transportation options? How will visitors travel between the areas, or will they just have to stay in one spot and spend their money only in one specific region? The answer is more mobility options. Florida East Coast Industries is leading All Over Florida effort, which is a privately funded project based on the legacy company of Henry Black. We're leveraging a 120-year-old rail corridor to make this project a reality. This irreplaceable asset developed the very cities that you all call home and changed the landscape of Florida more than 100 years ago. We are poised to transform the state yet again through the return of passenger rail. I will address the comments that have been outlined, but before I do so, allow me to reiterate that we are a private company, that this is proposing this intercity passenger rail system that has been advocated by the members of the public for decades. We have not asked for a single grant or not asking for any ongoing subsidies. Two facts that make us different from any other effort in passenger rail, either service that's ongoing or proposed in the state of Florida. All Aboard Florida is an endeavor that will benefit the entire state of Florida and the cities and counties along the corridor, even the ones that don't have stations yet. And I'll get back to what my caveat means in a minute. This project will remove millions of cars from our roadways, create tens of thousands of jobs, and add tens of millions of dollars in tax revenue throughout the state. We'll also connect two of the most populated and visited regions, fueling economic development and tourism growth. The strong South Florida economy means more people will move to the region and call the Treasure Coast home. We have said from the start that since this is a privately funded effort, we need to get the system up and running before expanding and adding additional stops. Many of you at this table have advocated and told me why a station in your city or county makes sense. And I told you that our team will evaluate all those options as we go forward. However, we need your support to make the Orlando-Miami segment successful, or there will never be a potential to add any stations in the Treasure Coast. We know that these are issues that need to be mitigated. This is a 235-mile transportation project and runs through 8 counties and 45 cities. The Federal Rail Administration is leading the environmental impact statement process to determine what mitigation factors for those concerned will be. Since the EIS process started in April 2012, we have conducted about 300 presentations, meetings, briefings, outreach sessions to local governments, homeowner associations, business groups, environmental groups, and other communities along the corridor. We have heard these concerns and have already made commitments, like paying for safety improvements that are needed at each of the grade crossings that would have been the responsibility of the local governments due to long-standing agreements. The railroad owns this 100-foot wide corridor between Jacksonville and Miami Center, privately owned, which means local governments had to ask permission to cross the right-of-way and enter into agreements outlining who is responsible for the maintenance of the grade crossing infrastructure which serves the roadway. It's in place to protect the roadway and the traffic that uses it. This is a significant investment on our part and allows communities to focus on finding the funding for quiet zones, which according to the federal statute is the responsibility of the local authority that has jurisdiction over the roadway. As I mentioned, we all want to greater connectivity and mobility options to expand their market and encourage economic growth. And we recognize that it comes with additional stations. But as a private company developing infrastructure, we must focus on building a project that we can afford and making it successful, then expanding. All of our Florida will determine additional stations based on ridership and the impact of the actual operation plan. Regarding quiet zones, we have said repeatedly that we will work with local governments on coordinating the installation of quiet zones infrastructure while under construction so that local governments can realize cost savings. And we have been flexible on the timing of reimbursement to accommodate different budget cycles. The Palm Beach and Broward NPOs are leading the charge with tighter funding for quiet zones. We encourage the local governments to reach out to them and determine the best way to coordinate and be a partner. All of our Florida remains supportive of such efforts, and the fact that we coordinated meetings with USDOT leadership in April on the quiet zone. And I know Mr. Busha is well aware of that and is working towards that. If local governments wish to add pedestrian crossings, like sidewalks and other implementation of infrastructure, we will work with them and coordinate that through the roadway safety improvements that will occur over the next few years. Our team has completed a grade crossing diagnostic review in Palm Beach, Martin, and St. Lucie counties in coordination with FDOT and FRA. And our team is in contact with your staff on all the improvement plans that are needed for that. Now is the best time to determine what improvements your city and county would like to make additional to the safety improvements. We have heard from each of you on the advanced notification and improvements to the grade crossings will be very helpful. We are committed to working with our sister company FECI to provide more notification so that proper budgeting and planning can be done for all the maintenance of the grade crossings. Regarding the impacts to the navigable waterways along the corridor, each of the bridges along the FEC corridor are full and full compliance with the applicable rules and regulations. They're inspected annually and a report is submitted to the Federal Rail Administration. Therefore, we're not changing the actual structure of the St. Lucie and Los Angeles bridges, but the environmental impact statement process by the Federal Rail Administration will analyze and evaluate any potential impacts resulting from the actual operational increase of train service over those waterways and determine what mitigation is consistent with the impact. FECI's subsidiary, Parallel Infrastructure, is responsible for developing the fiber optic network in the corridor. The company representatives have met with Commissioner Fielding numerous times and have offered specific proposals, which includes a discounted rate for government entities wishing to connect to the fiber network. We look forward to working with commissioners that will present and provide access to that fiber network. With respect to the freight rationalization, many jobs are tied to the maritime industry in South Florida that serves the cargo industry. The state is consistently competing with Savannah, Charleston, and Norfolk to get freight to unload its containers here. Getting these businesses is predicated on fast freight rail service that can move cargo from Miami to Jacksonville quickly and into the national railway system. That means there will always be that need to use the FEC tracks. The freight trains can ship to other corridors. Our affiliate company will explore those options. In fact, there's a story of the Progressive Railroad this month. There's a paragraph that I think you'll find to address your point. To quote, the Northwood Connection Rehabilitation will provide a faster northwest to southeast connection between FEC and South Florida rail corridors and facilitate the improved connectivity to major intermodal centers within the region. One completed FEC trains could run from Port Miami to Orlando on the CSX corridor. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Northwood Connection will connect South Florida rail corridor and FEC in the northwest Palm Beach and allow a certain number of trains to utilize the South Florida rail corridor into South Florida. This project is being led by FDOT, and it was awarded a Tiger Grant last year. It could be operational as soon as 2016. All over Florida understands local governments have invested in parking and landscape improvements along their downtowns within our corridor. In our meetings with each of you, we have committed to working and finding with your staff solutions to maintain those existing improvements, as long as it works within the actual infrastructure they're proposing. Because every single one of them are different, they're all on a case-by-case basis. We believe that commuter rail affords another opportunity to grow and develop our region and provide additional mobility to residents and millions of people living in South Florida. Negotiations are underway. I am not involved directly in them, but you should know that an identified team from FDOT, the RTA, and FEC are working hard to come to an agreement. And I don't think we're very well aware of that structure. Now, regarding the agenda before you, the Regional Planning Council freely interchanges FEC and all the local public entities. FDOT, NPO, and local governments, and U.S. Coast Guard are public entities. Again, I want to reiterate, we're a private entity, and we need to have that clarification. But we're requesting that staff change the language throughout the document that they're sending to the FRA to reflect that FECI is a private company. And by working with our government, transportation, and planning agency partners, and planning the future, we can develop a transportation system to allow our region and state to prosper and attract more tourism and economic opportunities. All of Florida is committed to working with each local government and community along the border to address their concerns and identify ways to improve and grow the state. And we look forward to continued dialogue and discussions with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gonzalez. I know that it's a difficult topic for you in many senses, and I could realize you're reading from a pre-written speech. I just want to make sure that you realize that this is obviously a very difficult issue for a lot of communities, realizing that we're here to help protect the general health, safety, and welfare of our communities. And with what you're proposing, what you're discussing, in many ways, it negatively affects what many of us believe is the quality of life we've been asked to represent. And so I think from that standpoint, I just want to make sure that your comments, I heard them, some of them seemed a little disingenuous. Obviously, it's careful with the words that you're trying to say, but I just want to make sure that you continue to work. I was concerned when I heard from Commissioner Corona that they just found out about the 3 tracks, realizing that's going through St. Lucie Village, where the cost for them to put in quiet zones would actually be in excess of the cost of their actual annual budget. So it's a concern, realizing that they have 6 crossings in their little village, and then realizing the Tiger grants are actually already being worked in Broward County, which is benefiting from a stop, whereas the communities that don't even get a stop weren't even brought up to speed as it related to the advance of that Tiger grant process, which is one of the funding mechanisms for that. So I just want to make sure that you remain sensitive to those aspects, because there are a lot of things that we're sort of seeing and hearing that bring cause and concern. I do want to let the council members ask you some questions, although I did have a question as it relates to, it seems to be brought up on several bases about you're a private company and that you're not receiving subsidies, you just stated, but I keep hearing comments that you actually have applied for either federal or state funding, that you're pursuing other monies outside of the private sector.
We don't disclose our financing structure, but it's a real private company, and we have applied for a loan, not a grant, not cheap money, it's a loan. I want to be able to reiterate that because that is a process for that, and that's why it's kept out. Guys, it's a confidential process.
15, can we move on?
It's a confidential process, like Kim was saying, from the FRA, because it is a private transaction. It's not free money, it's not something that's disclosed. It's part of a transaction that happens just as anybody else would apply for a loan. They keep those documents confidential. We're a private company that doesn't disclose its financial structure, but it's a combination of debt and equity. That's basically the bottom line for the actual project. It's no grant to operating subsidies.
Thank you, Jay. We have in terms of comments, Commissioner Smith.
Mr. Gonzalez, thanks for being here. I think it's important that you're here, and I think everybody needs to hear from the company, and that's great from your perspective. Something along with Kim's list, and I think to Commissioner Solari's thought process relative to prioritization and focusing on if we can do that. And why Mr. Gonzalez is up there. One thing I would encourage us to try to do is how do we separate what are federal issues versus state issues, and then there is a separation between how those may affect the ask, if you will. I think that would be helpful towards prioritization. The other thing I would ask you to consider, and this is a discussion amongst folks, just trying to understand all the various different ideas about how this can work better for all of us. With the 16 trains that they were planning today, relative to the release, what we understand, if there is a way, and if there is a process by which some portion of these trains can be flag station stops on a more local level. So in other words, if you've got 16 running north, 16 running south today, 2 to 3 of those be allocated as flag stops. And for those of you who don't know what flag stops are, they're basically a stop in Stewart or a stop in Bureau or a stop somewhere when there's a passenger available to be picked up. And that might start to answer some of the questions about how do we start to develop a local service within the network or within the capacity which is being proposed today. Not all of the trains, but certainly maybe 2 northbound, 2 southbound a day, and we start to open out that concept. Just to have on the record and I don't necessarily expect an answer, but just as a placeholder, if you will, for discussion.
Other comments? Commissioner Solari.
Again, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. I've got a few questions if I could. The first is, does Fortress or any related company have any gaming interests?
Can you speak to the mic a little bit more? Mr. Solari.
Does Fortress or any of its related companies have any gaming interests?
Fortress has many different investments. The investment we're under is transportation. We have no gaming interest at all. There's no involvement in that particular side of business at all.
So Fortress has no gaming interest?
Fortress has many investments. They have many investments in various fields. The entity of Fortress is a fund that owns us, so we're under private equity under this big bucket. We're only focused on transportation. What Fortress does across the board, they have various investments. It has nothing to do with us. If it has, it's not. We're not involved in it. Period. I think I'll answer your question, but I do.
In the financials for the All Aboard Florida project, is gambling in any way a factor in the financial analysis?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned that all the economic benefits of the project in the area. Is your financial analysis available which shows those?
It's a private company. We don't want to disclose our financial.
Yeah, it is a private company, but you're asking for an awful lot of government support. Let me finish. An awful lot of government support, including a federal loan guarantee, which is a form of subsidy, and the cooperation of a lot of local and state governments, including the state corridor, so you broke the nexus. And this is a project which would, more than some other projects, would allow for disclosure of financial analysis because it's a one-off type of project. You're not competing with this type of project with any other organizations. So the general reasons for wanting the financial privileges of a private company aren't really available in this. So again, I'll be done in a second. Again, you're free, absolutely free, not to disclose. I've got no argument with that at all. But if you want government support and community support for the project, I just offer that up as something which ought to be available. And again, I don't think you want to answer the question. I think you want to take that back to your superiors.
I'm happy to take that back. But all of the financial review is done by the FRA through that process. So there is data submitted. And again,
I've seen other government entities do financial analysis, which
I'll be happy to take that back.
I go back to my constituents and say, I understand.
There's a process that's why I have to find out as well. But we haven't disclosed, we've told that we're not allowed to disclose things, so I'll be happy to take that back and again, I should get it. And I have your contact, I have contact you right now.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanks.
Yes, sir. I would like to address one major issue, and that's the bridge over the St. Lucie River. Freight train right now, the bridge is down 17 minutes. If you add 2 passenger trains, it's 9 minutes each. And if you should happen to get 2 freight trains, and freight was a key word in your presentation, if you do 2 freight trains, 17 minutes each, that's 34 minutes, and 2 passengers is 18. That bridge could obstruct navigation for up to 52 minutes an hour. That will destroy a minimum of 2 of our marinas, and it will definitely have a huge adverse impact on property values for waterfront homeowners west of the bridge that bought that property to boat and be able to navigate through that bridge.
Appreciate it, Mr. Conlon.
Any comments from council?
Just so you know, we actually are working with the marine industry in St. Lucie, and we met with them several times. It's not as simple as you're adding up for the crossings. It doesn't work like that. Not every train crosses. The only thing they'll cross twice are the passenger trains, freight trains throughout the 24 hours. So it's not adding, just to get a number and say I'm going to add that crossing to every hour, it doesn't work that way. But we are actually having a whole model analyzed to it, and we're working on how we can find and make sure that there are plenty of open time, if you will, for the bridge for marine traffic. We're very respectful of it, we're working on it. I took a whole trip here. I went to show me the areas down at her area to see how the bridge operations would impact the residents. So we are definitely not disengaged, we're very engaged in figuring out that balance between the maritime industry and the freight service and the passenger.
My concern, despite that, is the increased freight traffic is only going to be compounded.
No, and that's, and the analysis takes the growth. It's not just what's there today. We're looking at how we grew when it grows, how it's going to be interacting with the actual bridge. So we're very sensitive to what's the maximum it's going to grow. We're plugging it on. It's not there today. It probably won't be there for quite a while. But we're modeling it so that we give the open time sufficient to balance out that equation. So that's our commitment. We're committed all. We have 3 movable bridges. We're committed on 3 different sections to work with the industry. We engage all 3 industries. And Kim has been there for a lot of meetings and took a lot of input. And our guys are working on that. And that all gets submitted to the Coast Guard. So it's not us just saying it. It goes through a process, and then that ends up in the record decision as a specific condition. So it's not that we're just trying, it's going to be a requirement of operating the system.
Commissioner Davis? I just read you, Commissioner. Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is really, I think, a comment and a request that you count. NEPA is a great statute. I've seen a lot of good EISs and some not so good EISs. The beauty of NEPA is that it can lead you to a good decision. I think in the case of Arsenio, it's even been led to a good decision across the Parkway after a lot of painful analysis. Just some observations. I share the chairman's comments that we need to make sure, County, this does look at all these impacts to these communities and addresses them fully. I'm a little concerned. The average time to do an EIS in this country for a transportation project is 5.5 years. This one is on a very, very fast track, and it tells me that things are being done quickly. I'm not sure that's good. So I think we need to make sure that things are done right and not just quickly. I also think that the action agency has the ability to extend that 45-day comment period on the draft. I would suggest that we ask them maybe to give us the time we need to look at that draft so we can make sure all these things are both positive and negative. But I think we also need to make sure that the document certainly looks at the impacts of all of these communities along the corridor, but it also needs to look at it from a big picture perspective as well in terms of transportation for the region. What are the impacts to the bigger transportation picture? Will there be negative impacts or positive impacts in terms of cars on the roads and so on? So it's a very complicated thing. It takes time, it takes a lot of effort and money to do this right in the county. And I would suggest that we need to make sure that we're pushing back on the folks doing this to make sure we get these answers and help us make informed decisions. Thank you.
Give you some information on how it prosecutes the NEPA. So if there are no steps to get the things maps being overlooked. So map 21 created an expedited process for NEPA. Why? Because there were NEPA processes that took decades. And by the time they finished it, all the information was outdated. So they kept on restudying. So what ends up, we actually get a list of everything, and that was agreed to last year. What was the study? And all the agencies said, what was the study? The difference is we're, as a private company, we're able to invest and accelerate consultants to do it instead of saying, here, consultants study it, and they may study it for 5 years because it's in their contract to study it over 5 years. We condense the time. There is no need. We can gather that data and have the same analysis within the time frame that we're doing it without having to compromise any of the NEPA's integrity. And that, Kim can definitely come back and verify that for you, but it doesn't, just because you're accelerating doesn't mean you're skipping over a step. It's actually the same level of data that's collected and the same day that level of analysis is done. And so, from that standpoint, can public input processes be expanded? They can. That doesn't expand it by 3 years, but it expands it by months. But so, from our standpoint, we're ready to make sure it accelerates because obviously it's an investment, so we want to see it happen sooner rather than later, and it's something we've been talking about for many years.
Thank you. I have Mayor Long and Mayor Taylor.
Thank you. The greatest frustration that we run into with our citizens is the fact that there's so many unanswered questions, and the answers are changed daily. And I appreciate the opportunities that we have had to meet with all of Florida and are going to continue to do so. But the issue is, and again, we have the Lock and Have crossing in Jupiter and the residents here shares the impacts, and we are going to continue to be very vigilant and very concerned. Issues such as coordinating train times sound wonderful in theory, and I don't care how much they want to run on time. A minute or two throws everything off. Trying to coordinate passenger train with freight trains is difficult. Certainly, I was quite concerned when I heard the comment that freight trains might be pulled to the side to let the passenger trains cross. The Loxahatchee River the bridge is in very close proximity to two vehicular crossings, and it really limits anything that can happen and ties up major roadways in both of those communities. So it's just a frustrating process. I appreciate everyone that's working to get the FEC to be more forthcoming and to explore the options of reducing the time that the bridge is down, but that continues to be an issue. And to date, we haven't really seen any proof that that's going to change substantially. That continues to be a major issue. And as we look at the issue of the still corridor and appearance and whatnot, I just again remind all over Florida that the communities that currently have landscaping are paying lease fees for that landscaping. And again, that is probably as varied as some of the other fees among communities. And I just want us to remember that as we look at what additional costs the local governments would be asked to take. We start balancing because I think it really boils down. It boils down to it really. I certainly can't ask my constituents to accept the impact of the change. And it's as this process has gone forward, it's become more and more clear. The concept, the idea of passenger rail is great, but it's the details. And the more the details come out, the more dismaying it is. And so it's just really ask the railroad to work whatever for, whether it's the all over Florida or your infrastructure, the infrastructure division's got to work together. The way it's going right now, I mean, you see the reaction you're getting, and that's just not. We end up with sort of the idea of the old Robert Baird Railroad, and that's the perception. It's just not going to have anything to do with it.
And I think we've been very open with, you've been part of the process with some of the stuff to do with the bridge operation. So we together we continue to have dialogue on whether we take the input from you and how we can do it.
That's why I think Jose's comments are important, that we do need to make sure we keep lines of communications open as we can and make sure that we get the best result of this process is moving in certain directions. That Mayor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess earlier this morning when I was preparing to come here, they had on the news about the bridges and being up, and actually they were saying that what's the solution, maybe moving something to the west. So all of that is just truly not acceptable, so we really need to look in the box, not outside the box this time. But I have three things. Any county representative and this was the closing off of Ventura, which maybe I misunderstood her. So that's the main corridor for West Palm Beach. We have a lot of businesses in that area, so maybe I misunderstood what she said.
So, we've been working with the city of West Palm Beach. There are two specific grade crossings. The blocks in West Palm Beach are very short. So our trains and our platform are 1,000 feet long. Right? A short train, but it's a very narrow block. And so those two grade crossings have to be removed, but we are building the infrastructure and working with the city of West Palm Beach to build infrastructure that goes around the station. So it's not like dead ends and people don't go around. There's actually circulation around the station that will happen. And that's an ongoing thing that we have in the city of West Palm Beach. So you have numerous east-west connectors along downtown West Palm, starting with Clematis all the way through down to Fern. So we will have those connectivity, and that's what we're working with the city on to have that. If there's no other way of putting a station downtown West Palm Beach, because the train is about to be long.
So if I'm understanding, you're not closing off Ventura.
We'll be routing the perimeter road in the city's master plan that we're building.
So you're telling me that West Palm has agreed to have those roads closed?
Well, it's those grade crossings are, again, it's a crossing agreement that we have with them. And so we're removing the grade crossing and rerouting the road around.
Could you just explain this, I'm not a trained person. So you're saying that you're going to, a car cannot cross there?
Right, you'll have to go around the station.
So you're going to have to go to another road?
So we're Fern, we're going to Mass.
Okay, so that to me is an issue. It should have been brought to the public.
And it is. We've had open discussions with the city of West Palm Beach.
Business.
And we met with the downtown development authority, met with businesses in the area, and with city place, and
Well, the city place is not an issue for that.
well, there are neighbors, there are exactly the
You're talking about
Yes. So we've engaged the local community on that.
I guess we didn't count it, know that, because we are in the downtown.
We've actually met with the county and the county administrator, the county engineer, all about that.
We didn't come to us.
This is the county.
It's a big county neighbor. I understand that it's a city road.
Again, I think the communications just, I mean, we have there clearly have been little discussions here and there, but that's why I think it is important. And that's maybe more common to Kim and Michael, that just more communications and things coming out so that people are a little bit more aware of some of the
Okay, and I also brought up about the Riviera Beach switching, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with that. I don't know if you met before, which you probably have, but that switching area is a problem as it exists today.
And the FDOT has and is doing several things that will improve that switching area. Right now, there's a hospital nearby that is blocked. And so my understanding, it's a current issue today, right? And so FDOT has met with, it's a freight side of the house, we're operating there. I've met with them, and they're coming up with infrastructure changes that would help that. So I forget the name of Blue Heron, is the
Blue Heron.
So I know that there's a plan to either an overpass or a siding that's going to be done so it doesn't block where the switching happens. So FDOT is working on it right now. I will get to it. It's an FDOT-driven effort. I'm just giving you information. FDOT District 4 is the one that's doing that right now, and you may want to inquire with them. It has nothing to do with the passenger side of the house, but FDOT District 4 has a project for that right now.
So your train is not going to go on that track?
It goes on that track, but we don't block it. It's 1,000 feet long. Crosses an intersection, that's 45 seconds.
So you cross the 45 seconds?
Man, we're only 1,000 feet long. We don't block it. The freight trains that we're talking about, right, those are the long freight trains, the unit trains. Those will still exist, and that's the thing we're referencing today. All of the Florida trains are smaller, and they cross the intersections much quicker.
Okay, I think Commissioner Guy and perhaps myself need to ask you to come visit with us.
I'll be happy to come visit with you.
So that we can open it to the community.
We've met before. We'll engage again. We'll have some discussion. So.
I want to ask Michael if you would just make a quick comment here so we can help with some of these comments.
Mayor Taylor, this is up to you, the mayor of the board as well. If you'd like to pass it on to Kim, not to Kim.
Okay.
Go ahead and work with your staff to do a briefing in front of the county commission district. Because there's a lot of pieces to it. And, the NPO did part of it, and the cities aren't here at all.
All right, I have Mayor Ferrari, I have Mayor, then I have Commissioner Corona, I have Councilman Kettner.
Well, we're just on that same subject, because would you please include the Township Park? We share one of the crossings there, and we would like to be included in that.
Mayor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Although our community isn't directly affected because we're to the west, I think a good planning exercise that the FEC can do, because they have the data, is you already know how many freight trains you have in the system right now. You already know your projected schedule for the passenger. I think if there was some kind of overlay just shown to, especially in these areas where we're going to stack freights and weigh what's the plan and who's involved to solve that plan, because it's evident that there are different speeds of trains, there's different lengths of times that crossings are closed, bridges, etc. But I think that schedule, which you should already have for present day, at least was analyzed, because it'll be pretty close when you start this thing. I think that would help all the public understand a lot better to, what are the ramifications? What are the delays that we expected? Do we need to be lobbying for more overpasses in certain areas? Do we want certain streets closed and not others? So I think that's a good thing. My other point was, yesterday, due to accidents and backup on that, I traveled Dixie Highway through Delray Beach all the way down through Boca, going to Deerfield Beach actually. And school is out this week in Palm Beach County, and along the FEC tracks, I saw at least 6 different occasions of kids trespassing, either going to parks that are on one side of the tracks or the other. So I think this whole sealed corridor is a big issue in terms of public safety. I think a lot of time needs to be spent on that, all working together to come up with a design. As an architect, I think we want something, aesthetic in our communities. Even though we don't have rail in our community, I would be very concerned if he's seeing what looks like a prison running up and down the rail corridor. And I think it's got to be more than landscaping, because I know on Lake Worth they put landscaping along their sidings, and kids just cut through and create a path. So those are just my 2 comments. That I think if we could get some of this out on the table, I know the public would be a little bit more at ease, at least on those particular issues. And just finally, one other comment. I heard Mr. Gonzalez talk about DOT being involved, but that's a cost that the public is going to bear when it goes to DOT. If they're going to build a flyover or a crossing, that's going to take away from DOT money. But in my community, we want for resurfacing the roads. So, we see all these other proposals for grade crossings through the MPO, and it just takes away from the normal maintenance of roads that, and at least in our county, are deteriorating just tremendously. So, I think, again, working together, understanding what's going to be necessary so it can be budgeted and planned.
Thank you. Mayor. Commissioner Corona.
Keep trying to make me mayor. You asked us for support, and I can understand that would be very important for this. You described the benefits to the state of Florida, giving us a competitive edge, taking advantage of our more mobility options, the higher quality of life. But that's not the question I'm being asked as a commissioner. The question I'm being asked is, what's it going to do for our community? When I asked that question when representatives from all over Florida came to our commission meeting, and I said, what good is it going to be for our community? The gentleman said that as the trains bring these passengers through our community, they'll be able to identify the beauty and vivaciousness of my community. And I'm thinking to myself, at 110 miles an hour, what was that? That was Fort Pierce. Oh. I don't mean to make fun of it, though. That's the questions I'm being asked as a commissioner, is what's the benefit to my community? We know what the impacts are going to be, and those impacts normally are balanced off with some type of benefit. The thought of someday maybe getting a station in Fort Pierce, that's just not good enough for me. I guess I've been in government a little bit too long to buy into that a little bit. But I really would like your thoughts on that. What do I tell the people of Fort Pierce? What do we tell our people of Indian River County? or Martin County and all these other outlying areas that are going to be severely impacted by this train, what can we tell them about their community and what benefit this is going to be to them?
So, from our standpoint, there are several benefits that Florida is going to get. And what happens is, Central Florida, South Florida are all donor counties, donor communities. Right? They give more than they actually receive because it goes to the state of Florida, then they divvy it up across the state. I don't know if Fort Pierce is a donor community or not, but I'm sure the state of Florida helps with a lot of things. So growing the pool of dollars that go to the state is an important thing for the whole state's economy. When we talk about tourism is not, the point of us connecting these two regions, believe it or not, is actually having people traverse them, identify with them, and then, again, with every system, if I build all the systems that would not be financially viable right now, then that doesn't do, as a company, it doesn't do anybody any good because then I would just fail at it. So if I build a system and I grow it, and then I'm able to expand on it, which is how all rail systems are done. Rail systems, when things like they did it, you grew it to a certain point, and you kept growing it, and as demand happened, and you brought his real estate, it actually ended up having a reason for people to go there. So you've got to get the base system going. It's not, it's not mentioning if I stop in Fort Pierce, or I stop in Beer, or I stop in Stewart, right away, will that be something? I have stopped here now. Your staff has come to my office, I've come to your office. I've had continuing dialogue. We're very serious about that dialogue. We want to make sure, and we actually are studying and looking into how Fort Pierce plays a role in it. So it's not just lip service, it's actual man time. And we're building real stations in the places where we know the ridership today. Our whole ridership study looks at the whole corridor. If Fort Pierce grew up right there, there'd be a station in Fort Pierce today. But it didn't. It identified the stations we talk about. And that's partly because the way that you guys are situated from a tourism perspective, you want to grow more tourism. So I think that's what I've heard from your staff is you want to grow more tourism there, and this is a vehicle for growing that. Now, we're growing it in a way where it's strategic. We're growing tourism where it is today, exploiting the fact that you can now take that stuff and exploit it for tourism in the sense that you got Central Florida who is not seeing passengers and tourists from South Florida, and vice versa. People go to Central Florida and don't come to South Florida. Now, if you actually have that interaction between the regions, you actually now cross-pollinate both regions and everything in between. So it's not literal, it's actually a real thing that our studies show that it has an effect on the whole corridor. So, but it's a process. It's not just here's a station for Pierce, and if you build it, they will come for them. We know they're going to come because they're there today. They're saying we need an additional service. That's why this is making sense. So that's, from our standpoint, it's a process to get there. But the immediate economic impact goes to the state, and the state disperses it down to the local communities, because that's how it works today.
Part of the impact, you say if I can grow my tourism in Fort Pierce and show there's a need for a station, we'll put a station there because economically it'll make sense. But the impacts that are coming from the high-speed train are against me growing my tourism, because now you've stopped all the movement from the east side to the west side.
How am I stopping the movement? I'm asking that with respect, because the reality is we're thinking that this train is 2 miles long and moving at 110 miles an hour. This train will stop your grade crossing at a light change. That's the longest that east-west traffic will be in whole, is a light change through that grade crossing. So a light change through the grade crossing is just like a normal action of traffic. So it's not like people are backing up and saying, oh, today, Tri-Rail operates 50 trains a day from Miami to West Palm. And Tri-Rail does not have an impact on traffic that you're saying I'm going to have this grid run. It's not, I'm not telling you what will happen. You can go look at it today. And this is the same type of train as Tri-Rail. It's a short train that moves to the intersection quickly.
Well, according to your 30% design plan that we just went through, staff shows that I have a third rail where it's going to divert freight until these high-speed passenger rails, and 2 of my key crossings are going to be affected by this. So, I mean, in that way
I put this down, and I have to get with the engineering team, because there's no reason, from what I've been working with, unless they're switching. Is this near the downtown where the switching station is today? There's an overpass there, and my understanding is that it will not be blocking any grade crossing. So I don't know if that's misinformation somebody gave you. We're not diverting freight to stay blocking grade crossings. That is not in any of the plans that we work. That's whoever told me that, I need to find out, because that's not correct information.
Well, I'm just
And
saying.
that's the problem. There's a lot of information coming out, and a lot of it's people speculating, and not. And what I want to do is make sure I give you the realistic information, and that's what the EIS process does. It takes all of this information from various points, puts it in one place, analyzes what's fact from fiction, and it comes out with that binding document, which is a record decision.
Well, you know, the problem is I have to support, you're asking me for my support, and I have to be able to talk to intelligent people in my community and tell them what the benefits are going to be. To tell them that we may be getting stationed way down the line once we've proven an economic impact to FEC, I don't think it's going to get the job done. And with all the impacts that you are discussing and that we know are going to happen to our community, it's going to have an effect on our government to be able to move people from one side of the track to the next. And that's going to have a dynamic effect for the tourist town that we are and we've become.
And I'd love to meet with you. We've been here all day.
Just to remind us, we're not here to have an imposition per se, although obviously we have comments and questions for Mr. Gonzalez. Really today, the agenda item that we have is really to transmit comments to the Federal Railroad Administration in advance of the publication of the draft EIS. This is really about that action, and then obviously any comments that we provide relative to this EIS. The kind that we want, and we want to do regional workshops and do some of that. So that's really what the action is. We obviously came to give an additional update because it made sense to have to follow Dr. Delaney's presentation. So I appreciate the time we're taking. I did have two more hands, but I want to see if those are still there. I realize I'm going to be going on for ideals. Mr. Governor, Mr. Brief, please.
Every time you sidetrack the freight train, when it takes some time to get back up to speed, it's going to block our local crossing for an extended period of time. It just takes longer.
No, where are we sidetracking?
If you need to sidetrack the train, and then
that's what I said. I don't believe that's true.
Well, even if it's not blocking the crossing when it stops, when it recommences, it's starting from 0 miles an hour, and all the energy and everything is expended getting back up to speed, so that the freight train crossing is going to take longer. That's one thing. And is my analysis correct in a 200-mile run from Miami to Cocoa that these freight trains could be sidetracked 4 times?
That's not correct. That's where I told them that information of sidetracking freight trains, that's not, in any of the models that we have, it doesn't have that happen, because with double tracking the corridor, there's no need for that. There are places where there's switching happening. That's a freight thing that's happening today, and that's where that third switching here, like in Riviera Beach is an example.
Even though the trains are on both directions, you're not going to be sidetracking freight trains?
Because you're thinking of volume of trains. We have a model, an RTC model, that actually has that, and it has trains moving all the time. It doesn't have trains waiting for others. That's what happens a lot of times on the South Florida corridor, and that's because they're not equipped with enough infrastructure. We don't have that issue on it. I'll be happy to get with you and we can show you how it functions.
We really
I just don't want to
Last comment then. I'm here partially because I'm a property rights advocate, but on this one occasion, I'd like to point out that the municipalities should become familiar with what limitations that FEC has on their bundle of property rights. It's kind of an uneven playing field right now, even though the spirit of cooperation needs to be maintained. Any property rights that FEC has do have limits on them, and when they start impacting your public safety and noise and appearance, there are some limitations the municipality should be